And as we all know, we are still in this phase where we are learning about JavaScript. So for today's class, we'll be focusing on APIs. Now, these APIs are very important concepts in today's world. In fact, almost everything we do, everything we purchase online, every website we visit, every app that has a credential, almost all those things actually have an API they are using, at least one or the other. In fact, some of them even use multiple APIs. And so JavaScript also has its own API. But for this class, we'll be learning exactly what an API actually is. So this knowledge of API is actually a generalized concept and not really related to JavaScript or any programming language just yet. So today we'll just be learning about APIs generally and what they are used for. So the content for today's class is focusing on just APIs purely. And as you can see on the screen, is just one section we have. Now this section has been broken into different parts, and you can see the first part. It begins with what is an API. So here we would see a brief definition of what an API actually is. Something very easy to understand. You see what the definition is. We would also look into an explanation of this API, because APIs are quite complex, and so I've actually mapped out a kind of diagram to explain how this API actually works and how it is. Next, we'll see an example of a JSON format. But before we see this example, you all will get to know why the JSON format is actually important in the whole concept of APIs. After this, we would see the importance of APIs, why these APIs are even important, because nobody would just want to learn something, that isn't important out there. But here we would see why they are even important to know about. Even if we don't know how to, write codes that can use them, we would at least know why these APIs are actually important in our daily lives. So next we have a restaurant and an online travel app analogy. Now this analogy has been structured to actually better your understanding about APIs, and one or two of these analogies can actually be something that has happened to us before, and I'll explain why it is that way. Next we'll get to see the types of APIs out there, and after this we'll focus on what a web API is. Now, if you remember closely, we learnt about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And these technologies are actually integrated on the web. And so, because they're integrated on the web, we'll be looking at web APIs and not any other APIs out there. We'll just focus on the web APIs. Now, after this, we'll see the types of web APIs we have, and we'll also see some examples of web APIs. And hopefully, with all this, I believe we would have gained an understanding on a beginner's perspective of what an API actually is. So, this has actually been made because it's important for us to understand what APIs are before diving into JavaScript web APIs. So, without wasting much time, let's see what we have. And as we all know, it's APIs. And so we begin with the first part of this section. And here we have What is an API? Now, I know some of us have heard the word API before, either from a developer, software engineer, someone who's into tech. You've probably heard him say that word before. An API. We need this API. We need that API. How do we integrate this API? This API is bad. This API is good. You know, you've probably heard the word before for some of you guys. And for those who haven't heard the word API before, at least now you've heard it from my own mouth. So I've already used that word and you've heard it also. So what is even this API anyway? Now the API is short for Application Programming Interface. So breaking this, you know, word down, we have the word application, which basically means an app. We all know what an app is. Something you use, it performs some particular operations. It has been created to perform a specific task. That's what an app is. That's in a layman definition. Next, we have programming. You know, from the word programming, it basically means some particular amount of instructions that has been arranged to be performed in a particular way. You know, you program a machine, you program a calculator, you program a stopwatch, you program a clock. All these devices have been programmed to perform their functions in a particular way. So this means that they can never go outside what they were programmed for. So that's what the programming here is. And lastly, we have the word interface. This word shouldn't be new to us because interface here represents, a particular display like a screen. On a basic level, for instance, we all have a smartphone. It could either be an Android, iOS, or whatever, maybe a Java phone, or all those small phones. But one thing common with these phones is the fact that they all have an interface. And the interface here is the display. That's the screen you see. And that screen gives you the ability to perform some particular operations on these devices. So the interface here appears on mobile devices, laptops, even some calculators, anything that just gives you a screen where you can actually make, some kind of operations is an interface. And so the API here is an application programming interface. Now, this API is actually a software interface that establishes communication between two applications by acting as an intermediary between them. Now, going back to the word interface, most of us know that, our laptop screens, phone screens, they actually have interfaces that we can use to interact with. But do you also know that even the machines themselves have their own interface? By that, I mean your laptop, your smartphone, your iOS phone, your iPhone, your Android phone. Those machines have an interface that they communicate with. Now, the interface that we see on our smartphone, which is the entire screen, is the one we, the user of the phone, can communicate with directly. But the device itself has an interface that even we cannot see. We can't see it. Only the machine can see it. And when the machine communicates with it, it actually enables us to see the one we can actually see. That's the screen. So, in a layman definition, you know, we can see the interface of our devices. Our devices also have an interface they can see, which we cannot see. And that interface that our devices can actually see, that we cannot see, is actually what an API is. So, going back to the definition, I said is a software interface that establishes communication between two applications. So, you have one application, you have another application. Now, these two applications might want to communicate with each other, but they can't communicate directly. And because they can't communicate directly, there wouldn't be any communication established between them. But with the use of an API, it can actually pass the request of one application to the other application and get a response from there and send it back. So the API here establishes communication between two applications by acting as an intermediary between them. By the word intermediary, it means that this API is in between two applications. Now, these two applications want to, communicate with each other and they can't do it directly. But with the help of the guy in the middle, that's the API, it can actually help the first application communicate with the second one. And that's why the concept of APIs are very, very important. So next we have a brief explanation of what the API is, and I'll be explaining what this diagram actually means. So on the left hand side you can see a box which has your custom app there. So now this custom app there can be a website, it can be an app, it can be a web app, it can be a normal application that a user creates, something you could develop, something your team could develop, something a company could build. Is just an app on its own. So now, have you ever wondered when you are using some websites or some apps, you try to log in into that website and you see things like log in with your Facebook account, log in with your Google account, log in with, most times you see most of them having that option of logging in with your Google account. And you would see this particular option in different websites, irrespective of what they are. You can go on Pinterest, you would see login with your Gmail. If you go on, you know, Amazon or some other website, you would also see the option of logging in with your Gmail or your Google account. It's so popularized. Even in some games that you play, especially on Android phones, you would notice sometimes when you're playing games, you would see something like log into your Google account or your Google Play account. And this particular functionality cuts across different kind of games. So you're probably wondering, how is this possible? The concept of APIs is what made this possible. So from this diagram we have, you can see we have an app on the right hand side, and that app is linked to what is in the middle, which is the API. So imagine we had a website. Let's say we had a website we created and we wanted people to, wanted to display some YouTube videos on our website, you know, or you just want to display some pictures that are on Facebook, or you want to display some tweets that you saw on Twitter. Maybe you like them and you just feel, your website should have them for the users to see. Now, on a normal day, trying to do that would have not been possible. And if at all it was, it would have been very difficult without an API. But with the concept of an API, you can actually embed different kind of services from different companies on your website, your web page, or your web app. So going back to the diagram, we have a custom app. which could be your normal website or app. So let's assume our custom app here is our website. And let's assume this app we have here is YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, or let me think of a popular one, Google Map for instance. Yeah. So you've probably visited some modern websites and you'd see something like, where the person puts his contact us details. You'll see a Google Map appear there to show the address of the company. Some modern websites now make use of that. Now, that can only be possible with an API. And so what this means is that the app we have on the right side here, let's assume we want to make use of Google Map on our website. So this app we have here is actually Google Map. That's Google Map. It's one of the services that Google offers. So let's assume this is Google Map, and this is our custom app right here. Now we want to display the location of our website. Let's assume it's a company website, and as a company we have a building. Now that building has a particular location in Nigeria, and we don't want users to just know the address, but we also want them to know how to navigate to the place. That's by making use of Google Map. Now, in order to do that, this Google Map we have on the right side here is going to have what is called an API. So this means that an API here is going to be attached to this Google Map we want to make use of. So now this API here is like a doorway, an entrance. Some of you might, use the word a portal into being able to access Google Map. So now on a normal day, assuming we don't have APIs at all, what you are trying to do will not be possible. But then with this API being the doorway to Google Map, all we need to do is to make a request to the Google Map, and we do that through the API. So remember again, our custom app is our company website, and this app here is Google Map that we want to make use of on our website. So on a normal day, if you were to sit down to create, a map using your normal knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, trust me, that would be extremely tiring. In fact, I don't even think you would eventually finish, creating the map, because after creating the map, you would have to create addresses, locations, places. You would literally have to put in every existing place in the real world in that map, just so your user can understand. So imagine how tiresome that would even be for you. But here with APIs, it has made everything easy. Now, instead of you going through the stress of building your own map, all you need to do is look for a company that already has an existing map. Many of us already know that Google has what they call Google Maps, and it is embedded on every Google account. So in order for us to make use of this Google Map, all I will need to do is to send what is called a HTTP request. So if you look at this diagram, you can see we have HTTP request with this arrow, which is going directly towards the Google Map. So what this does is that our own app would send a HTTP request to the Google Map, and this request will be sent through the API. So what this means is that our Google Map is not receiving the request directly. No, the request is actually being received by the API, and then the API that is connected to that app will then go to the app and deliver it. So this is quite similar to, you trying to visit a very, very important person. Now, if you try to visit the president of Nigeria or a minister, majority at times, if not all the time, you will never get direct access to him. Never. But then, whatever you want to relate to him can actually be relayed through another person who is close to him. And so, when you send your message to that person, he would actually be the one to help you deliver it to the president or the minister or whoever you actually want to talk to. So that's how the APIs here actually work. So after the Google Map has gotten the request from your own custom application, it has gotten the request and it already knows the required response to give to you, which is that picture of Google Map. The next thing it would do is that it will send the response through the API itself. So this means that it doesn't send you the response directly, it would only send it to the API. And then the API will take that response back to your custom app. And then you would see that your app now has a Google Map embedded in it. So that's how basic the APIs actually work. And so this response can actually be in what is known as a JSON format or an XML format. So these formats actually depend on the kind of API you make use of. Some websites actually have APIs that have content in JSON, some have just in XML. But the most popular one is actually the JSON format. So most times when you make requests with an app and you want to use a particular service from that app, you will mostly get the format in a JSON format. So very briefly, that's what an API really is. So here we have an example of what a JSON format looks like. So you can see that it looks like it has a kind of object, is of an object type, that's an object data type. And you can see the object here has location. Location here, is the name of this object. And it holds the value of the rest of, the objects we have here. And so you can see for the location here, we have the name string assigned San Francisco, we have the country, we have the region, we have the latitude and the longitude. We also have the time zone ID and we also have the local time. So this example we have here is actually a weather app API response. I just, look for a random one to use here. So this is how the JSON format would look like when you get a response from that API. So next we have importance of APIs. So now I'll be explaining some of the reasons why these APIs are important. And for the first importance here, it's actually dealing with fetching and accessing data. So fetching and accessing data here is a very important role of the API. So I made mention of you trying to, make use of Google Map. Now Google Map has a lot of data it is built with. Data of places, data of addresses, data of roads, train transport, bus stops, rail stations, airports. Just imagine those kind of pieces on the Google Map. They are all data. And so in order to fetch and access this data on a normal day, you can't do it at all. But with the use of APIs, it is actually possible to access this data. Now, the next importance of the API actually deals with hiding complexity. Now, going back to the example I talked about using our custom app and Google Map. So, when you communicate with Google Map through an API, you get a particular response. Now, that response you are getting is not the Google Map exactly. It's actually a kind of concatenation of different functionalities put together to enable Google Map to appear on your own website. Now, it might shock you to know, but those functionalities are not things that even you are aware of. You are not aware of how Google Map is trying to, put things in place just so you can have your map. No, all those things you are not seeing it. You do not know it. All you just know is that you connected to Google Map through their API and you had Google Map on your website. The functionalities, the mechanism, the complexity of how that was possible, you don't know it. But you just know that you now have Google Map on your website. And so that's why APIs are very important. They hide the complexities of those kind of operations. Now, the next thing we have here is extending functionality. This is also an important part of the API. And this actually has to deal with, let's take for example your Android phone or your iPhone. Now, your smart devices, they all have APIs that are inbuilt. And so these APIs actually help when it comes to structuring how the entire content of your phone would be displayed on the screen. So let me explain in this way. Let's assume you have a widget on your phone. It could be WhatsApp, it could be Facebook, you know, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, anything. Now those applications, they all have notifications, and you would know that most times when you turn on your data, those notifications pop up on those devices. Now, have you ever wondered how when you turn on your data, the moment you have a notification, it just updates or it just appears at the top of your screen? You probably don't know how that happens. All you know is when you turn on your data and someone sends you a message on WhatsApp or Facebook, without any single second delaying, you've already received it. Now, how the message or the notification appears on your phone or how the widget even displays, you do not know. All you know is you've turned on your data, someone sent you a message, and you've already seen it. So, this is actually with the help of the API, because with the app you have on your phone, let's assume it's WhatsApp. The WhatsApp app will communicate with your phone API and tell your phone that, hey, the user has a notification. Now, the next thing the API on your phone will do is it will communicate back to the app and ask it for, okay, how do I display this notification? And so, if it's a notification or a widget, by the time your API communicates with the app will then tell it how the notification should be displayed. And so that is actually how when when you turn on your data, you just see those things popping at the top of your screen. They just line up, after the what's it called? Those normal menus that actually enable you to do some small functions on the phone. You see the notifications right under them. You've never wondered why the notifications never appear at any other place in your phone. It doesn't appear down, it doesn't appear by the side, the right or left side. It always appears at that top side. And so the API that was already in the phone has been built in such a way that any app that communicates with it It would actually enable that app to show the notifications at that part of your cell phone or your smartphone or your Android phone. It will never show somewhere else. So this means that if it doesn't show there, then it means you don't have any notification at all. So that's how the API actually extends its own functionality into enabling you to see your widgets, notifications, and other stuff. Now, another importance of this API could be as a security system. Now, you would have noticed this when you're trying to visit some websites. They will always tell you to turn on your location. I think that one is very popular. Some website will always ask you for that. Some would ask you to log into your Google account or your Gmail or your Facebook, or use a particular system to log into it. Now you are probably wondering why those questions. And those questions are there because the APIs on your phone have actually secured some private credentials about you. Your location, for instance, is private. Your phone number is private. Your Google account is private. Facebook account private. All those things about you are private. So unless you are the one who chooses to give that app an access into knowing your location or knowing your Gmail or knowing your phone number, the API already secures that for you by default. That's why if you see most times when you download an app for the first time, you would see a message like allow this app to use your contact, allow this app to use your pictures, allow this app to view your photos or your videos, allow this app to record, to use your microphone on the phone. All those things are actually being secured by your API. So until you decide to give that particular app an access, by default it doesn't have any access at all. And so that's why APIs are very important. Okay, so here we have the restaurant analogy. And I said that this analogy is going to be used to make your understanding of API is very, solid, at least in terms of knowing what it does. You would actually understand it better. So I believe every one of us here at one time or the other we visited somewhere outside our house to eat, mostly a restaurant, a an event center. You've actually gone out of your house to buy something or eat something. And so when you go outside, you're actually regarded as the customer because you are the one who is coming to purchase what they have. And so when you want to buy food, you actually visit the restaurant and you take a seat, and the next thing you are given is a menu. That's for the people who use the menu. Now, this menu is not something that you automatically have, no. It's something that you are given when you come into that restaurant. And the person who gives you that menu is known as the waiter. That's if it's a male. If it's a female, it's a waitress. Either ways, they would give you the menu. So the next thing that happens when they give you the menu is that you look through it and you actually try to see the food that you like, the things that you love, the things that that will make you happy when you eat them, so to say. So that's what you look at in the menu. And so when you look at this menu, you pick your choice, you give it back to the waiter, and then he takes your menu and he delivers it to the people who are making your meal. So now you've never wondered how you, as a customer, have never directly gone into the kitchen to ask for food. Yeah, I guess you've never done that. And most companies will never allow you do that. So in this particular restaurant analogy, you yourself being the customer, you are like the application who wants to make use of something. So you can see the waiter here. The waiter here is like the API, the person through which you will send your request, and then it will take your request to the kitchen, and then they will make up something for you to eat. Now, the kitchen here could be a server, or it could be the other application that you want to make a particular service of. And so in the kitchen here, they will make your meal exactly the way you ordered it. And then instead of giving it to you directly, no, they would relay that food to the waiter, and the waiter then would give it to you. So this is very briefly how an API works. The waiter here is the API. You here, you are the customer, and then the people in the kitchen cooking your food are actually like the server or the app that you actually need to a service of. So that's how simple this analogy is. And this is actually pertaining to one activity that we've at least engaged in at one point in our life. And so you might be wondering, you get your food from the waiter. Now, that meal you've gotten from the waiter, you might not even know how to cook it. You might not even know the ingredients they use in cooking it. The process of cooking, the ingredients, the recipe, you don't even know anything about it. All you just care about is that you order this food and it is delivered to you. So that's exactly how an API works. The kitchen prepare your food with the exact recipe, exact, ingredients, the particular amount of time these ingredients must be put together. All those information, you the customer, you don't even know about it. All you just care about is that you get your food and your food is gotten to you. So all those cooking, boiling ingredients, they are like the complexities of the entire process of making that food. That's why if you remember from the last slide when we talked about importance of APIs, we said that APIs are used to hide complexity. So this complexity, you do not know about them. And the waiter obviously will never let you get to the kitchen. He will stop you the process you are trying to do that. So he will be the one to go there and see how they are cooking, how they are putting everything, and he would wait for the entire food to be ready before relaying it to you. So that's briefly how the API works. So the next analogy we have here is the one of an online travel app. So for many of us that like to travel a lot, it could be local flights or abroad, anyone. You've actually made use of a travel app before, or a travel website. Now you'll be wondering, these travel apps, they usually have different flights to the location you are going to, and these different flights are connected to different kind of airlines. So in Nigeria, some of the popular airlines I know about, the Dana Air, the Max Air, Arik Air, Air Peace. Some other ones are the Cabo Air and the Ibom Air. So all these airlines, they actually have their own independent services. But then this online travel app is able to show the different airlines and the different airplanes for these airlines that are going to where you are going. So this means that in the midst of all these different airlines, you would end up just going with one of them, and that would be based on your own preference. Now, how this is possible is actually through APIs. And so let me explain. Now, each of these airlines, the four of them, they actually have their own private services, their independent websites, they have their own independent, company name and everything about them. But then each of these websites have their different flights to different locations they are going to with their different planes. So for this online travel app, this travel app might be created for a particular user to be able to know which airline is actually going to a particular location. Probably you don't want to go with Airpeace, you want to go with Arik Air, or you want to go with Max Air, you want to go with Dana Air or any other airline out there. So rather than going through all the different websites of each of these airlines to know which, which flight is actually going to where you're going, with an online travel app that is created by someone out there, he can create this app and connect to the APIs of these different airlines. Now, mind you, these airlines they all have their own independent websites, and their website has, actually has the time and the flights for different locations in Nigeria. So Airpeace has the one for only its own airline, Arik has the one for only Arik, Max Air has the one for only Max Air, Dana has the one for only Dana. But then you can't start going through each of these, websites to know the flights that are going to where you're going. But with this online travel app here, which is made by someone out there, a person could create this and then connect to the APIs of each of these airlines. Now, by connecting to the APIs here, you can actually process a HTTP request which has been set to, to actually respond with particular flights and time and available, flights that are there. That's the flights that are available at that moment. He might want to get it on his own app. So he would get the one from Airpeace through an API that is connected to the Airpeace website. He will get the one from an Arik Air website through the API, from the Max Air through the API, and from Dana Air through the API. Now, this is just four of them. He can actually get as much as he wants from multiple airlines. In fact, he can get it from the entire airlines in Nigeria. And so, on this online travel app, you will actually be able to see the different airlines with the different flight time and the ones that are available to go to, where you're planning to travel to, all at the same time on real time. Now, on real time is very important, and this is because it's possible for someone to book a flight and probably 5 seconds after the flight was cancelled. So you wouldn't want to connect to, you know, you wouldn't want to connect to an API where it is showing that the flight is available, and whereas on their own website it's showing that it has been cancelled. The connection has to be on real time. And so for this to be on real time, it's the reason why the API is very important. So that's how it actually works. And so when a user visits this travel app, he would see different airlines, different flights, the ones that are available, the ones that are not available. He will see all these things on real time. So this means that as Airpeace is canceling a particular flight that is probably not ready, on our travel app will automatically see it as cancelled and not ready immediately. So that's actually how important these APIs are in this analogy. So next we have the types of APIs. So the APIs are of different types. And first we have the open APIs. Next we have the partner APIs. which is followed by the internal APIs, and lastly we have the composite APIs. So we'll be getting to see what these APIs actually are. First, we have the open APIs. Now, these APIs are the ones that are publicly available for anyone to use, and they sometimes do not have restrictions while using them. So, what this means is that it's an API that has been developed by someone, and it feels, you know what, anybody can use my API. I don't care. I don't care what they want to use it for. I just put it out there for anyone to use. So, due to the nature of this API, which is public, they can also be called public APIs. So, these APIs are just basically out there. Someone out there actually created them, but he probably just felt, anyone, anybody can connect to it and use it. And sometimes you can see free APIs which could pertain to some particular type of data. You know, maybe a user who owns a big brand, could be e-commerce, and he has data on his website. He could make the API public, so anybody who needs data from his website can connect to it and get the data of people's transaction or whatever. It's just public. Anyone who needs it will use it. So next we have the partners APIs. Now these APIs are not available to the public. No, they are not. But then for you to use these APIs, you need some specific rights or license in order to use them. So this actually means that to make use of these APIs, you will need to contact the owner of the API and get a license from him in order to use them. Now, to obtain this license, it's mostly a paid license. So this means that you would actually pay some amount of money or fee in order to make use of these APIs. But as opposed to the first API, which we saw, which is the public API, most times you are not paying anything at all. In fact, almost all the time you are never paying a dime. You just see it and you just connect to it. Next, we have the internal APIs. Now, these APIs are also not available to the public, but they are different from partner APIs. So here, the internal APIs are used internally or privately by companies that developed them. So this means that they do not have a license for anybody out there who wants to use them. No, the company or the person develops this API for his own personal consumption. He didn't develop it for you to use. He didn't develop it for me to use. He also did not develop it for someone who wants to, get a license from him. No, he just develops it for only him to use. And so it's actually possible to have this kind of APIs. And most companies or organizations actually have internal APIs in order to boost, efficiency in the workings of their, workers. So some companies just create this API, and this API is used just to boost the efficiency in the operations of the workers, to make them work better and more efficiently is the reason for some of these APIs. Yeah, the last and not the least, we have the composite APIs. Now, these APIs are pretty different because they are a combination of multiple APIs. So, a composite API is actually an API of APIs. So, by APIs, I mean, multiple APIs, two, three, four, five, as many as possible. So the Composite API here enables developers to make requests to different servers. Now remember that the API here is a combination of different APIs. So when you make requests to a Composite API, you're obviously making requests with different multiple APIs. And these multiple APIs have different servers they are connecting to. So this means that indirectly you're connecting to different servers of these APIs. And so once your request is fulfilled, you would get a response from these different APIs. But remember, they were a combination of all of them as one request. So you would also get your response as a combination of all of them as one response. So that's how the composite APIs actually are. So we've seen a lot about APIs today, but then since we are dealing with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we'll be focusing on what a web API is, because there are different APIs out there, and APIs are actually categorized based on different fields. For instance, you can have a hospital API, a school API, a sports API, an art API, a fashion API, a lifestyle API. Just know that the API in these different fields are used to obtain particular set of data relating to that field. For instance, if I want to know the number of artists that have won Grammy Awards from the inception of Grammy to this moment, I can make use of an API that is relating to the music field. Mhm. If I want to know the amount of goals that have been scored in football history combined, I can make use of an API relating to the sports field, particularly football. So this is why APIs are important in our daily lives. They are connected to different fields all across our life. So enough with that, let's look into web APIs. So what is a web API? A web API is an API for the web, and it can be accessed through HTTP protocols. So the web API is basically an API integrated on the web itself. So to access these APIs, we make use of HTTP requests, or you can also call them protocols. Now, these web APIs can also be described as application programming interface for either a web server or a web browser. So what this means is that a web API can either be described for a web browser or a web server. And so this means that a web server has an API and a web browser also has an API. So this brings us to the next section, which is types of web APIs. And as you can see, we have two types of web APIs: the client side web API and the server side web APIs. Now we have the client side web APIs, and these APIs are programming interfaces that help us to extend the functionality of a web browser. So it's actually safe to say that the client side web APIs are connected to the APIs on your browser. That's on your Google Chrome, your Microsoft Edge, your Mozilla Firefox, your Safari browser. All these browsers have an API inbuilt in them. And so this API is actually what helps us, in terms of some particular kind of rendering, extending functionality, on different things we are trying to do. Now, with your web browser, you can perform things like knowing your geolocation. So, by this, I mean the location of the browser. You can actually know it through the API on the web browser. And also, some kind of functionalities can be done with the web browser client API. So, the next web API we have is the server side API. And so, this programming interface is the one that consists of one or more public endpoints to defined request response message system. Okay, so this is a lot, but basically what this means is that the server side web API is describing the API connected to a server. So I made mention of how you can connect to Google Map API, Google Map through its API. So imagine Google Map having a server which has all those data you need. So the API on that Google Map is actually known as a server-side web API. And so this API has an endpoint. So this endpoint is through which you would actually connect to. And then within this endpoint is a defined request response message system. So what this means is that a request is made to the web API and then a response is sent back from the API on the server. So the server API accepts a request which can be from a user, an application, or anything out there. And for that request it was sent, it also gives out the expected response. And it does this in a message system. You know what a message system is. You pick up your phone, you go to the message app, you send a message to someone. When the person you send the message to gets your message, it gives you a reply. So that's exactly how the server side web APIs work in a request response message system. Lastly, we have examples of web APIs, and I made mention of Google Map API. So the Google Map API allows developers to embed Google Maps on web pages. And this can be done by making use of JavaScript or Flash interface. Another example is YouTube API, and this one also allows developer to integrate YouTube videos and functionalities into their website or applications. So even YouTube has an API. Lastly, we have Amazon API. And this API actually gives access to Amazon's product selection. So if a user wants to know how Amazon selects products, he can know that by making use of the Amazon API. So far so good. These three examples here are server side web APIs. And so there are multiple APIs like this too. Facebook has its own API, Twitter, Instagram, um, as many as possible. Even WhatsApp too has its own API. So many applications out there have APIs, a lot, because through these APIs you can connect to them and make use of their different services. So all in all, I guess we've come to the end of the basic understanding of what a web API is. Hopefully, in another class, we might be seeing how we can actually consume some of these web APIs using JavaScript. But I hope for today's class, we now have a good understanding of what exactly an API is. And I am sure every one of us here has at least learnt one or two things about an API. So thank you for joining us, and hopefully in the next class we just might see how we can actually consume APIs using JavaScript. Thank you.